But I wanted to offer one in case you don't know it yet. It's novel to you, and it's really my go-to exercise for each of these tests. Now note that 2 of the tests, the exercise is the same. That's the lunge test and the lateral step-down test. So I'm going to show you 5 movement tests and 3 exercises as far as videos go, because 2 of them are just the same as the test. All right? Okay, first one is the Thomas test, and it's aimed to measure passive hip extension. And if done correctly, not a bad test for assessing passive hip extension. Hasn't been thoroughly studied, but I think if you think of it more of an overview and don't get too particular on the degree, I do speculate on the amount in degrees of loss of hip extension in my subject, but I don't advocate doing that. It's really, do they have hip extension or not? And then if they don't, mild, medium, or severe. That's kind of a better way to look at it. Performance of the test accurately is a big deal because there's a lot of false positives from doing it wrong. So watch the video on how to do it. Elaine, go ahead and begin, please. This is the Thomas test to assess passive hip extension. Have the runner sit on the edge, very edge of the table, have them rock back, both knees to chest. Just enough to flatten the back. Don't have them pull too hard or you're going to get a false positive. You just want a flat spine. Take one leg, let go, and take a hold of this leg with both hands. And we're going to let this leg come down, keeping it pure. Look for substitutions in abduction or rotation of the hip. We keep this in a pure sagittal plane, and we feel for restriction. He's restricted right there, and we're talking about minus 20, 25 degrees hip extension. And that's the Thomas test. Thanks. Test number 2 is the deep squat, and this is borrowed from the functional movement screen. This is a great test for overall lower extremity range of motion and strength, especially functional dorsiflexion. And it tests gross glute strength, glute motor control, whether we're willing to use the glutes, core control, thoracic extension. Thoracic extension is something that you might not be looking at for the runner. But if they don't have thoracic mobility, it affects their midline stability, and it ultimately shuts down their posterior chain. So without a good juicy thoracic spine, you're not going to be able to activate the glutes and hamstrings as much. So it even does that. The only thing that's not related to running in the deep squat test is glenohumeral flexion. But otherwise, everything in tests the runners need. So it's a fantastic test. Go ahead and begin, Lane. Thanks. The deep squat measures symmetrical, functional mobility, bilateral mobility of the hips, knees, and ankles, as well as thoracic extension. Instructions are feet shoulder width apart, down on top of the head, straight up, and squat to a comfortable depth. From the front view, I'm looking to see that his hips are not adducting, and he's maintaining arch integrity, his feet are facing forward, and that his chest and gaze stay forward. Second, from the side view, I'm looking to see if his heels lift, if his femurs get below 90 degrees, and if the dowel stays over his feet. If any of that has failed, then squatting facing the wall becomes a great exercise. Thank you. All right, test number 3 is the lunge test, which is a great way to get a quick look at whether they have enough ankle dorsiflexion to run. If they fail this test, it becomes the exercise. And let's go ahead and watch. Go ahead, Elaine. Thank you. The lunge test is used to measure functional dorsiflexion in the runner. Barefoot, have them start with their toe flush to the wall and touch their knee to the wall, keeping the knee over the center of the foot. And if they can do that, start backing them up 1 inch at a time to see how far they get away from the wall, keeping their heel planted and still touch the wall. Again, make sure they stay in line with the foot. 4 to 6 inches is ideal, or you can use the inclinometer on the anterior shin, measure the vertical, greater than 35 degrees. This is the exercise I use if they don't get at least 4 inches or at least 35 degrees. I send this as their home exercise home. Thank you. My subject there was cheating, lifting his heel up. Competitive runners will lift their heel to get further, and I do not lay down the measuring stick until they've reached their maximum. Because if they see a measuring stick, then they see it as a game, and then they try to go further and they cheat. So the measuring stick comes in after, so they don't know it's a test. The next exercise is the lateral step-down test, which has been found to be a reliable test for assessing this particular lower extremity movement. And this particular movement tests a lot related to running. Research has developed a scoring criteria, which I put in your handout, but the video just shows you some quick things to look for. Scoring criteria goes into a little more detail. Go ahead and begin, Elaine. Thank you. This is the lateral step-down or tap-down test, which measures eccentric glute strength, single leg balance, and pelvic stability in the frontal plane. Paul standing on an 8-inch block. Instruction is to tap the foot on the ground without weight bearing. And I'm looking to see if his knee is staying in the sagittal plane. Substitutions is through hip adduction or interrotation, the knee will roll inward. And I'm looking to see that his pelvis can stay aligned with the frontal plane or no drop of the contralateral hip. Good. And that's a great exercise facing a mirror for somebody who fails this test. Thank you. And the fifth movement screen test is, well, there's the scoring criteria in your handout. The fifth movement screen test is the FMS. Yeah.
I was just wondering, if they fail the angle dorsiflexion test, do you hold off on testing this until they have sufficient range? Or
Good question. So a lot of these tests do bleed into each other. Like the deep squat tests ankle dorsiflexion. So does the lunge test, so does that. So that's a good question. I would probably proceed and see if the ankle is that stiff, yes, this test is thrown in the garbage. So maybe I'd put them on a smaller block, right? And see, the research is a 7-inch block, which is actually pretty high. So maybe try them on a 4-inch to take the ankle out and see if they can still do the rest of it. That's what I would do.
do you think the full 7 inches is adequate or necessary for running?
Yes, I think more than 7 inches is needed actually, but we need a test that is reasonable. It's tough. That's a tough call. I would say yes. Yeah, I would definitely. If you can't do a 7-inch lateral step down, I think it's worth working on. Yeah. But to your point, none of these tests in particular or in isolation or in a vacuum have been connected to running injury. So I'm theorizing that you put all this together, you're going to get a global picture, and maybe, someone, why don't we put this to scientific rigor and see what happens? But right now, not one of these tests would say, oh, you failed that, and you're toast. But maybe put it all together. All right, so the FMS push-up test. Assess trunk stability in the sagittal plane. Now, if the trunk doesn't have adequate stability during energy transferring activities like running, then kinetic energy is lost, and that leads to poor functional performance and possibly injury. Note that this test does use upper extremity strength, but the 1-rep nature of it might devalue the upper extremity strength requirement. Plus, it does give some inkling to deep core stabilizer activity. So it's not deep core stabilizers in isolation. The arms are involved too, but you can also get deep core information too. All right, so let's go ahead and watch the FMS push-up test. Thanks. This is the FMS push-up designed to observe core stabilization in the sagittal plane. We're not testing strength because it's just 1 repetition, but we are testing motor control and the ability to stabilize the core using the deep stabilizers in the sagittal plane, essential for proper running. Starting position, prone line, men, thumbs in line with forehead, women, thumbs in line with chin. Instructions are to get on the toes, lift the thighs, and then ask the client to lift the body as 1 unit. Begin. And you can see a segmental lift go right down. He lifted shoulders before hips. There's also a substitution of rotation. Anything that's segmental is wrong. It needs to be lifted as 1 unit. If you see segmentation, that is an indicator that the prime movers are engaging before the deep stabilizers. Thank you. So those are the 5 movement screens to assess injury risk. The Thomas test, the deep squat, the lunge test, the lateral step-down test, and the push-up. All right? So, as I said, I've come up with an exercise for each. No, I didn't come up with them, but I'll give credit where it's due. But three of them we'll have videos for. The hip flexor stretch, the squat facing the wall, and the abdominal raise in standing and falling. And then 2 are just the test turned into an exercise. The first one is a hip flexor stretch. There's a lot of ways to stretch a hip flexor. This one I like because it's aggressive and it stretches a lot of tissue, muscle, fascia, joint. I give credit to Kelly Starrett, Doctor of Physical Therapy, for showing me this stretch. Go ahead and begin, Lane. Thanks. This is an advanced hip extension stretch, a little more aggressive than traditional hip extension stretches, but you'd be surprised at how many runners will tolerate this, and you can do it in stages. The runner has his knee on